Alrighty. Hi, everybody. My name is Ben Zaleski, and this is my presentation or my lesson plan for digital media and information literacy, specifically focusing on finding and verifying reliable sources. The reason why I am sharing this as a video is that way you can go back and you can just reflect on specifically what I was thinking when I was creating this lesson plan. There's also going to be a PowerPoint shared on my class portfolio, so you can go on the PowerPoint and not have to listen to me speak this whole time if you don't want to. From there, you can go through the PowerPoint, you can make changes. I would really like to focus that this is a PowerPoint highlighting the lesson plan. It is not a PowerPoint you want to share with your students. It's going to be, you can use this PowerPoint to help create what you're going to do throughout the lesson. It tells you different activities to do, and it can help you create the PowerPoint that you want to share on your screen with your students. But this is specifically for you, and it is the specific lesson plan. So let's get started. All right, so I wanted to highlight our different lesson plan objectives. So our first lesson plan objective is understand why errors in information occur in digital media. So why are we getting fake news, and why are there so many unreliable sources? All right. Lesson plan objective number 2 is understanding the importance of digital media and literacy in our lives. Okay, so there is fake news. Why should I care about it? What makes this so important? How does it impact me? All right. Learning objective number 3 is going to be learn how to utilize different tools in finding reliable information. Okay, so I know digital media literacy is important and there's fake news out there, but how do I tell if something is reliable? And then that leads into the lesson plan objective number 4, which is learn how to evaluate sources for reliability. Okay, so you know how to find reliable information, but you're just not sure if it is actually, if this specific source from this organization is reliable. How do I determine it? All right. So from there, we're going to go over some logistics. Okay. So first, I designed this lesson plan dedicated to grades 9 through 12. So if they're in high school, it can be adapted for other audiences, such as kids younger or kids in college. Really, this is here for you to take. You can adapt my lesson plan to make it fit for how you see it, you need it. All right. Then I listed some materials needed. Okay. So you're going to need a projector to display your content to your audience. You're going to need some unreliable news sources and some reliable news sources. That way you can show how common and similar unreliable information can be compared to reliable information. It's not as simple as it sounds. Finally, you're going to need different search engines such as Google, Yahoo, Bing, all those different search engines. You're going to want to show them to your students how to use them and how to make sure you're finding reliable information. All right. So that leads us to our interest approach for this lesson. All right. So the goal of this is to have students learn how easy it is for information to become distorted and far from the truth. Now, what I'm doing for my lesson plan is I'm having students play the game telephone. So basically you'll have your students line up in a big circle or in a line throughout the classroom, and the teacher's going to whisper a phrase into one student's ear, and they're going to whisper it into the next student, and it's just going to go on through each student until it reaches the end. Finally, that last student is going to say that phrase out loud. You're going to see how distorted the phrase got from when the teacher started the phrase to the last student. Okay, and sometimes this can be really easy if your class is really quiet. So if you want to make it a little bit more difficult for them, you can play some loud background noise. All right, then over here on the right, you just have a little picture explaining the telephone game. So you have the first one, he's saying peas to the girl. The girl's going to say bees to the next guy, and he's going to say knees, then it's going to go cheese, and then it's going to end up with the last girl thinking they say fleas. Okay, that's far from what he said, but that's what she heard. So like, why should she ever think it's wrong? All right. If you want to learn more about this telephone game, I have a hyperlink right down here. You can click right here. Leads to the website where I got this graphic from, as well as information about the telephone game. So now I have some key terms that I like to go through for this lesson plan. So also there's a hyperlink right down here that leads to the key terms where I got my key terms and definitions from, as well as some more key terms that are important in digital media and literacy. But these are the specific ones that I wanted to have for my lesson plans. All right. So the first one's fake news. So false information or propaganda published as if it was authentic. Credibility, so the trustworthiness of something. Our biases, so prejudice consciously or subconsciously favoring one person or a point of view versus others. Reliability, the ability to be relied on or depend on. As for accuracy, honesty, or achievement. Evaluation tool, a process or procedure to judge or assess the trustworthiness of something. And then finally, search engine, so a software program that helps people find information they are looking for online using keywords or phrases. So that brings us to our first learning objective, understanding why errors in information occur in digital media. So I think the telephone interest approach does a really great job of highlighting this learning objective. So during this and after it, I really emphasize how easily it was for the phrase to be misheard from one person to the next and how it just really distorted the original message. And something I like to compare to is someone sharing a Facebook post and leaving their interpretation of it on it. Okay, so then their friend's going to see it and they're going to be like, oh, that's what that's about, and share their interpretation on it, and so on. It causes a domino effect until it finally reaches someone and they're like, okay, his interpretation is like completely sharing what the article is not about. It's completely false and it's fake news at that point. That leads us into our second learning objective, which is understanding the importance of digital media and literacy in our lives. So with this, I would start off this by playing the video from CNN, okay, about fake news. They talk about fake news in society, how it's so important that we understand that it's everywhere and we need to learn how to evaluate reliable sources. And then from there, I would like to play the video or read this article from, after the video, read this article from Fox News. Okay, this is also about fake news and how it's so simple for something to be shared that's fake and no one question it. Yet all you had to do was call someone and find out that that's completely wrong. Okay. Then once both media sources have been reviewed, ask your students some questions such as, why do we think digital media is important after watching this? And how does it impact your life? Okay. And then from there, I would focus on how both media sources agree that fake news is an issue and that digital media literacy needs to be addressed in our day-to-day lives. Yet, at times, these two sources are often will report some unreliable articles or they'll be called out for reporting unreliable articles. So that's really important to highlight that, like, okay, hey, CNN, some people believe is completely reliable. They provide the most important fact-proven information. Yet some of their information can be unreliable. And same with Fox News. That all depends on our biases. All right. Now we're going to go into learning objective number 3, which is learning how to utilize different ways of finding reliable information. So the way I would start this off is I would now have students list off some news sources they think are reliable and why. Okay, one kid says, oh, I think NBC is reliable. Why do you think that? Oh, it's because that's what my mom listens to in the morning. I want them, and when you ask these questions, I want them to really think about, be like, okay, so your mom listens to it. Does that make it reliable? Have them really question on if it actually is reliable or not. From there, I then would like to, I would show them the media's bias chart right over here. I also have a hyperlink to it where it originally came from, as well as information behind it. The media bias chart really just displays different news organizations and their biases they have. All right. So on the right side of the x-axis, you have people leaning more right, where on the left side, you have people leaning more left. And then on the upper end of the y-axis, you have organizations reporting facts, really reliable information, where on the bottom end of the y-axis, you have people reporting more opinion-based content. Okay, so you'll notice over here we have Fox News on the right side, more towards opinion-based, and then you have CNN over here, not completely fact-based, but it is a little bit higher, and it is little bit more right versus being on the far left. All right. But overall, on top, you have AP and Reuters and PBS, and then there's NPR in there. Okay, all these organizations are reporting facts and they don't have huge biases to their information. So really explain that to their students that like, hey, these organizations have biases. They're not always perfect. Okay, they're going to lean in one direction based on the type of audiences they have. And then from there, I would also like to highlight different ways of finding information besides news organizations. So using Google Scholar for research articles, or looking at different organizations such as American Red Cross or the American Cancer Society. Okay, looking at all these different organizations that aren't typical news outlets, but can also provide some reliable information. And specifically focusing on Google Scholar, I'd really like to highlight with your students how like this is a great way to find some fact-driven information. It's a little bit more harder to interpret because it is a scholarly, most of them are scholarly research articles, but you know that you are getting reliable sources when you use Google Scholar. That brings us to our fourth learning objective, which is learning how to evaluate sources and their reliability. So what I like to teach to our students is TARP. I know that does not spell out TARP because there's an added A, but it's simplest to say that. All right. So, and you can create your own acronym with it if you want to rearrange it and such, but that's how I like to do it. So our first thing is I wanted students to, when you're looking for reliable sources, look at the timeliness of it. Okay. Was your article recent enough for your topic? Okay. For example, I'm not going to read an article and write about it for an essay on cancer when this article is from the 1970s, when I could take articles from modern day 2021 about cancer. The information is going to be completely different based on those times. Okay. We know a lot more now than we did back then. Next, I'm going to go over authority. So does the information come from an author or organization that has authority to speak on your topic? Again, focusing on the cancer example, okay? I am going to take information about cancer from the World Health Organization. I am not going to listen to the Department of Natural Resources if they're talking about cancer. They both can be reliable sources, but the Department of Natural Resources does not specialize or have authority on the topic of cancer, where the World Health Organization does. Next, that moves into audience. So who are the intended readers and what is the publication's purpose? Okay. So this sort of leans in with the biases in those news media outlets. So we have Fox News. They're producing content for a more right-leaning audience, where CNN's gonna release content for a more left-leaning audience. So you just gotta keep that into account when you're looking at reliability of sources. Who was the audience this was intended for? Next is the relevance. So does this article relate to your topic? Again, let's focus on cancer. Okay. I am writing about cancer. I'm going to include articles about cancer. I'm not going to include articles about heart disease. Yes, heart disease can be influenced by cancer and they both could play together. But if I have an article specifically talking about heart disease, it is not important for my essay on cancer. All right. Finally, that leaves us to the last part of TARP, which is perspective. So biased sources can be helpful in creating and developing an argument, but make sure you find sources that help you understand the other side as well. I think a great example of this would be the border wall crisis currently going on in the United States. All right. We have one side saying open the borders and let all the migrants in and immigrants in. Then we have one side lock out the borders. We don't have room for them. We cannot care for these people here. Okay. Now, if you want to form a argument, you could just look at one side and be like, okay, well, this is what is happening and this is what should happen. Or you could look at both sides and be like, I see what you mean about your part and what you believe in, but I really think this is for the best. And you can really relate the content together and create a really well-developed argument there. Finally, right here's another hyperlink. This leads to where I got TARP from. It's from Brigham Young University's library. And the link takes you right there. It goes more in depth about each component of TARP and can really help you gain a better understanding about how to evaluate sources for reliability. And then this finally brings us to the review that you're going to have with your students. So I would have students reflect on each specific learning objective by asking them class questions. So first I would ask them, what did you learn from the telephone interest approach? Okay. And why is it important? Just so they can reflect on the learning objective 1. From there, I'd go on to learning objective 2 and ask them, what did the video and news articles teach them? Like, why is digital media literacy? What did those specific videos and articles bring to the table of digital media literacy? Next, we're going to reflect on learning objective 3. And by this, I would ask them what news sources they're going to use and where it is on the media bias chart. Okay. So that way they can sort of get used to using the media bias chart and locating news sources on there and just seeing what biases are there when you're gathering information. Just because there's a bias there doesn't mean the information is completely wrong. It just means that it's going to be tailored for a specific group, or it's going to have a specific audience, and it's going to focus on that perspective. Finally, we're going to go on to our last learning objective, which is number 4, and you're going to have them explain each part of TARP. So just go through TARP, TAARP, and have them state what the T stands for and the definition of timeliness, and just go through each one. That way they have a review and they are using their memory to really work through each part of this lesson. Alrighty, so that brings us to our sources. On the last page of my slide of my PowerPoint, I have my sources listed. It goes through who created the information and each website that I use throughout the PowerPoint. I highly recommend going through each source, reading the articles, and then if you have a source you want to add to it, combine them, really adapt the lesson to how you see fit. And that's going to create the best lesson for you and your audience. So yeah, thank you for paying attention. On my course portfolio is going to be this video so you can watch me. And again, if you don't want to watch me, I'm also going to have the PowerPoint just listed below so you can also learn more about my lesson plan without having to listen to me talk. So yeah, and if you have questions, feel free to email me. That will also be attached to my course portfolio. Thank you.